All right, so the first slide here is background to Erayim, Kyrgyzstan. And Erayim is a women's self-help group in Kyrgyzstan, started in the 90s. And I'm speaking today on behalf of a charity in the UK that supports Erayim in its teaching projects. So the projects that they have mainly been involved with from the early 90s are to do with small businesses that women can start. Childminding, bakeries, homestay, agricultural projects, greenhouses, getting markets to getting food produce to market before other people. Also, one of the issues in Kyrgyzstan is because it's a very poor country, very influenced by Russia. A lot of the men go off to work in Russia and send money home, and then sometimes these families at home break down, new families are started in Russia, and legal advice for the women left behind. That's also part of the work of Erayim. They get a lot of money from Port for die Welt, a German charity, and as I say, our little British charity called Erayim Aid Trust supports the education projects that they do. And their first move into that area was summer camps for children with volunteers from Britain, who were very often undergraduates studying Russian, who would be quite happy to go for a summer to Kyrgyzstan to practice Russian. And then the teachers, wherever these projects were held, started to say, oh, we want something, we would like something where we can practice English. So that's how it started. And there have been 6 courses now. The 7th will be next week in Talas. There was a gap for COVID, of course, where we thought about online, but actually because it's a teacher development course, the teachers wanted to be together, and that's sort of not in the interests of global pandemic. But actually we have thought again now, and that's why I'm here talking about a blended learning project today. So next slide, please. Okay, so as my model for the context of English in Kyrgyzstan, I've taken the Kakru's idea of the 3 circles, sort of developed in the 90s, and useful, I feel, because it shows where and how English is taught in any particular country. So he identified the 3 concentric circles. It's quite significant that they're concentric. The inner circle are those where countries where English is a mother tongue, USA, UK, etc. Although, of course, there are different languages in those countries. And that means English is taught to be an active participant in society, functional literacy, to appreciate the literature of one's culture. And the lessons are, of course, in English, delivered in English. And then he identified the outer circle, which is by and large the former colonies, which by the time they became independent were quite dominated by English language-wise. So in India, for example, with its many, many languages, English is an intra-national lingua franca. It's one of the official languages. It's the way different groups of Indian people might communicate. And English has a role still in higher education, law, medicine. So lessons are, again, invariably delivered in English in most schools. English is taught through English. And then the 3rd circle is the expanding circle, which he identified as the EFL, traditional EFL countries, where English had no particular role, just taught as a foreign language, with all the traditions of foreign language teaching, which might vary in different parts of the world, but often grammar translation, traditionally, language taught as an intellectual exercise, maybe to appreciate eventually the literature of another culture, but significantly less lessons delivered in the home language, the mother tongue of the students, and most of the lesson taking place in that language. So the significance for Central Asia and Kyrgyzstan now is that this is obviously an EFL, traditionally EFL situation. But you can see I've written the word large across the bottom of the screen is globalization. So over the past 30, 40 years in the present neoliberal period, we have trends towards much more globalization, and English is said to be the language of globalization in technology, science, business, and increasingly, and the collapse of the Soviet Empire has played into this. Academic communities now use English. So before the collapse of the Soviet Empire, Russian was an accepted language for publishing academic journals, but now 90% of academic journals are published in English. My father studied agriculture at college, and he had to do, this is a long time ago, he had to do German because German was an accepted language for studying agriculture. So the significance then is that academic communities use English. There are higher education establishments, English medium in Central Asia. So this is the inner circle. Moving into the expanding circle, what was normally foreign language, Middle East, China, Nottingham University in Ningbo in China. So in these regions, there are universities. You are sitting in one if you're in the room online, not online. So English medium universities, which exert an influence, a strong influence on schooling, education locally. So if we could move on to the next slide, please, thanks. Okay, so this is an example, this is just illustrating what I've said, is this is an example of a new course book in Kyrgyzstan. You won't be able to read it, I'm sorry about that, but you can get the idea that there's a dialogue on the left and there's some pictures of people speaking, but actually there's very little listening material in this book. And the dialogue is interesting because the characters, the setting for the characters interacting is international. So there's a Tom from America and Igul from Kyrgyzstan, and they're talking about maths equipment. What have you got? Your protractor? Have you got a calculator? Have you got a ruler? So they're thinking about, the context for this material is studying maths in English. So this is interesting. It's interesting. It's demanding, and that's why I'd like to move on to the next slide and show you how it's demanding. It's demanding because the teachers on every course we've had are 40 teachers per time. So the Erayim as a grassroots organisation is really good at getting to every local school. In Talas, where we're going to be, there are 17 schools in the oblast. All of those schools will be sending 2 representatives to the school where which is hosting the course. So large group, 40 teachers, and we test them at the beginning, and at the end we do presentations as a form of test. The general level is A2, B1. When we were in Osh last year, the general level was A1, A1, A2. There were 1 or 2 teachers who were at B level. So the demands that have been put on these teachers are enormous because they are not able to use much English themselves in class. So the lessons that I've observed, for example, in the after school club that Erayim runs in Bishkek, the teacher would just read a dialogue of the type we just saw in a course book between Tom and Agor. The teacher would read both parts, so the children probably weren't even aware that it was a conversation. I'm not sure. And the language we had most was Russian. So translating what's in the book. So it's all very well having communicative material, having material that's which is hoping to achieve what parents want. Parents want more English for their children because they see it as the language of opportunity. So, so our main task is to have more English in class and to try and encourage teachers to conduct the lessons in English. So this is part of a final presentation. I'm sorry they look so sad, but on the left there is a kind of poster that you might put in a classroom, nouns, verbs, adjectives with example words, just so the children are aware and the teachers know how to say this is a noun and just give examples: bus, car, ticket, and explain the plural. Put an S on buses, cars. So so that all this will be done in English rather than Russian or Kyrgyz. There is a dual system in Kyrgyzstan. You can choose for your children Russian medium or Kyrgyz medium, but we're hoping that we can promote the idea of more English in the English class. And on the right is a poster that they prepared for use on our course, which is language of management, organisation, instruction in class. Okay, so we'll move on. You're wondering, where does the blended learning come in? Right, so this is where the blended learning comes in. So the teachers, the first course I was on, this is like before COVID now, there were 3 teachers from the UK and 3 trainers, and we pay, our charity pays the travel. So it's a 3,500 mile trip. So this is quite expensive. The budget for a course is 5,000 thereabouts. But we have started to use more local trainers, and I feel that the mixture of video input from the UK with a local trainer, the 40 teachers can still be together, which is so beneficial for them. And I've just prepared here the topic, for example, of listening, which I would normally do on a course teaching this, how to teach listening, because there is virtually none in the course material, in the course books. So I would do a presentation, or the trainer would do, UK trainer would do a presentation on what makes listening difficult. It's ephemeral and different kinds of listening, gist and detail. And then the local trainer would actually, after 10 minutes of input, would do a listening activity. One that I've done before is a biography of Yuri Gagarin, which is in the material used by the British Council in the region, Peacekeeping English Project. And the reason I choose this is to just illustrate the idea of schemata and activating schemata, because listening about a topic that's familiar will be much easier than listening about something out of the blue. So all the teachers in this part of the world know about Yuri Gagarin, and it's a very short listening. So the teachers would do that with the trainer, and then there would be another 10-minute input from the video from the UK of how this task was easy, difficult, how to focus. You know, don't give children the right answer, just say, well, Aigul said 16 and Azamat said 60. Okay, let's listen again. Who was right, Aigul or Azamat? So the whole idea is that it's contextualized. The teachers will be listening to, talking about something they've just done themselves. So this is why I think it's a very useful thing to have these short inputs. And of course, the short inputs are because the teachers are themselves A2 level. And then jigsaw listening. So the teachers back with the local trainer in the room would do a ordering activity where they are able to identify, now we have pre-listening, while listening, post-listening. So and then a final 10-minute stage of input of where can we find listening, because they don't have it in their course books. They're actually quite enterprising at recording things at home on their phones, because they have the internet at home sometimes, but they don't have internet in schools. So that, and then they use what they've recorded on their phones. Okay, so that's an example of a blended listening session. It would be an hour, 20 minutes. to me, it's beneficial for the local trainers. They're building up expertise, and the teachers get to mix and practice their skills. Okay, so next slide, please. Sorry. Okay, as well as the blended learning, just as a additional way of engaging everybody and to avoid the inner circle dominance, because the inner circle country publishers are very keen to sell, of course, textbooks at £30 a pop to parents, ambitious parents in Bishkek. But I think what would be great, it would be if in these rural areas where there's very little money around, teachers can be making things. So we make posters, making picture cards for games, and also practicing reading aloud, reading a story, which is with expression, which is so useful for language learning. So these teaching tasks, because we still have volunteer students of Russian in the UK coming for 3 months or 6 months. This is a good thing for them to be involved with, and it's good for the local trainers to be involved with monitoring as well. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so the final presentation, as I said, to attract funding when you work in this voluntary sector and you're depending on money from organisations, mostly in Europe, it's very important to be able to show progress. So we test at the beginning, and the final after 2 weeks, the final presentation is done in English, and they're tested on whether they are, task achievement, fluency, and are they able to give a rationale for the activity that they're presenting. We have quite often had groups presenting songs because they're easy to record at home, easy to use in class, and motivating. The one on the left from a course in Karakol was very good. This was a line dancing activity where the teacher was the caller, calling out the steps. So a total physical response here as well. And the one on the right was Old MacDonald for younger learners. Other activities teachers have done are picture dictation, games, spelling bees. I'm interested because I think the spelling bees ideas comes from the American involvement in Kyrgyzstan. So every year America sends 26 Peace Corps volunteers, and they work in, they do a 3-month training course and then go into schools to help English teachers. Okay, so those are the final presentations. They look a bit happier than in the poster picture. Can we move on to the last slide, which is the challenges for the future? So, and our project. So our project has an issue with finding the trainers, which is another reason for doing blended learning. So the UK charity was started by teachers, but we're all of a certain age, and it's quite difficult getting people who are still in mid-career to participate. Resources in general, they're very expensive. Finding local trainers, we were greatly helped by the British Council formerly in Almaty, now in Astana, who provided us with a list of trainers who had been on a trainer training course in 2018. So we have gradually made contact with these people. Each rural area we've been in, we've tried to make links with a local person or someone recommended by them, because in this challenging environment, the GDP per capita is barely over 1,000. People who've had training do often move on. So one of the people we're working with next week, she's actually been in Russia for the last 3 years working. So and another one has started a language school in Bishkek. So people do move. So finding people to work with locally and getting our Erayim, the organisation we work with, who you probably got the impression from the beginning, from the first slide, of are involved, that their expertise is much more in agricultural rural projects. So yeah, but all these challenges are being met. It would be lovely to have more people in the region, because there are plenty of people involved with ELT and training in the region. So it would be really good to have a few more people involved. And if you look at the Area Aid Trust UK, there are contact details. And that just about wraps it up. Are there any questions?